Welcome to Litcast, the podcast covering literature notes and revision for GCSE. These podcasts are designed to be used as an additional revision tool. There's nothing new or groundbreaking here, just revision notes in an on-the-go friendly format. Using these alone won't guarantee you an A star, but they can help you build your confidence to apply this knowledge to your exam questions and your classwork. With that being said, let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of Litcast. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at the character of Nicole Renard from the book Heroes by Robert Cormier, part of the Unit 2 exam for GCSE. So who is Nicole Renard? She is an innocent young girl. She is described as a saint by Francis. We did mention this in the previous episode when we talked about Francis. He puts her up on this pedestal and he describes her as this saint, a saint being someone who is universally seen to be better than the average human, and is seen to embody everything that is good and pure about humanity. As well as that, she is the victim of Larry LaSalle, of course. So Cormier uses her as a symbol of innocence and purity, but she's eventually soiled by the actions of Larry, and she's a really great character to look at in terms of symbolism in the book, because she is described often as wearing white, and white obviously is, as a colour, we often use as a symbol of innocence, as a symbol of purity, linking with the theme of religion as well in this book. You know, quite often white garment is a key element in religious ceremonies to represent that innocence and represent that purity. So the use of that white in relation to Nicole allows us to make her almost synonymous with the idea of innocence. And then the day that Larry assaults her and Larry rapes her, she is seen to be wearing navy with her white, so it's that purity has started to be tarnished in some way. It's not completely white anymore. So looking at the symbolism and the colour messages that are there in relation to Nicole is a really lovely way to kind of explore her character, and is also looking then at word level analysis, which is something that you do need to exemplify in your responses. Nicole seems to enjoy the close attentions of Larry, and doesn't necessarily understand their implications. I think sometimes there's a little bit of a misunderstanding amongst students that Nicole refers to Larry by his first name. She likes that familiarity. She likes that bond with him. That doesn't mean that she is looking for a romantic relationship with him. It's a very, very, very different relationship. She looks up to him. She looks up to his status. She looks up to the fact that he gives the children of Frenchtown a purpose, and he provides so much for them. He gives her compliments. He admires her. He spends time with her to build her skills. So in the same way that Francis kind of adores Larry because he gives him that validation, then Nicole kind of feels the same. And there's a very clear distinction made there. It's very important to understand that distinction, because you have to remember that Nicole is a child. So understanding that sort of relationship, it's just not, it's not in her nature yet. Whereas obviously Larry is looking at something and much more sinister when he's viewing this relationship. She awakens love and devotion in Francis, who then gains confidence through their relationship. So the cinema trip right up to the night that Larry assaults Nicole. She blames Francis for not protecting her from Larry's assault, which becomes the key moment in his life. So obviously towards the end of the story, we find that she doesn't necessarily blame him in the same way as he quite imagines. But that knee-jerk reaction of blaming him because he was there and he did nothing, that then defines the rest of Francis's life, because he wants to atone for that sin, which he feels is the gravest sin that he could have possibly committed. She's broken and she's bitter after she's been raped. Remember that Larry LaSalle teaches Nicole how to become a great dancer, and there's some really good vocabulary related to the closeness, the physical closeness that they have with each other, and the fact that he allows her to slide down his body and then lay at his feet. That's a lovely juxtaposition between that relationship and Frances kneeling at her feet like a knight. There's definite status play there, and with this girl sort of stuck in the middle of these two very, very different characters who want very different things from her and have very different ways of expressing their feelings as well. She speaks honestly to Frances at the end of the book, indicating that their relationship is at an end and it's time for them to move on. So she doesn't necessarily hold a grudge, but you can kind of understand, you can imagine that she wants that closure in the way he wanted that closure, and actually that the closure for her involves moving away from him emotionally and physically as well. Frances takes 4 trains to see Nicole, and again there's that dedication there. I mean, taking 4 trains when the logistics involved with that, when he doesn't seem to be motivated to do literally anything else, it shows that he is completely motivated by her. She's described like a small animal, then a whimpering, like a small animal caught in a trap when she is raped. The descriptions around the rape that are obviously they're horrific and unpleasant to read, but the vocabulary there is again, if that pops up as an extract or if you are discussing the character of Nicole, the vocabulary is really key there, because her humanity is removed at that point. So that idea of an animal, that's kind of what she is to Larry, and it's what she's been reduced to as a result of Larry's actions. She's also described as having betrayal in her eyes, so my betrayal of her in her eyes, and that again, every single second being described at that moment where Nicole realises that Frances was there all along is really key, because that is the pivotal moment for Francis in deciding his fate, deciding his future. The softness was gone from her face. Her voice was sharp and brittle. Now, this is interesting. If you look at the vocabulary whenever Nicole appears before the rape, and, well, to a certain extent afterwards, but chronologically before the rape, there's a lot of soft, gentle vocabulary. It's almost like when you see in cartoons or in films, they put that kind of slightly soft filter on, like a rose-tinted filter. It was used quite a lot in kind of older films. And it kind of romanticizes the scene, like rose-tinted spectacles. And that's kind of what the vocabulary does. And that links right back to Francis being that biased narrator, because his feelings for Nicole seep into the words that are on the page, and his feelings for Nicole are then embodied in that softer, gentler vocabulary, that softer, gentler language. So have a look at those moments in the book and see if you can find any vocabulary that kind of links to that, because remember, those single words are key and important. And by using single word quotations, you're demonstrating to an examiner or your teacher or whoever's assessing you that you have the confidence to be precise with your evidence. If you quote 3 or 4 lines at a time, that comes across to an examiner or a teacher or an assessor like you are hedging your bets. You don't quite know what words are going to fit the point that you're making. So if you write loads down, then hopefully, some of them will fit. But actually, with single word quotations, you're being precise. You're showing them, this is exactly what I need to prove my point. So as much as possible, keeping those quotations short. Sometimes single words don't work, but keeping those quotations short and precise, again, is going to really aid your response. Other quotes you could use, she allowed me an innocent kiss. Again, juxtaposition between the relationship of Larry and Nicole and the relationship of Francis and Nicole. My Silver Star hero, don't leave. That's just before the rape. And again, that foreshadowing that she knows that something isn't quite right. She is perceptive. And it's quite easy to look at Nicole and think she is simply defined by Francis and Larry. And to a certain extent, when you're writing, she is defined by those relationships in the same way that Francis is defined by Nicole and Larry is defined by his relationship with Francis and Nicole as well. So the three are intrinsically linked. But she is perceptive, she is intelligent, she knows that something isn't right here, and in her own right, and she's trying to be proactive in stopping what she thinks might happen. Does she know exactly what's going to happen? Probably not, but she certainly knows that something isn't quite right, and she wants Francis there. Then she says, then that contrasts with the go away Francis afterwards. So that very clear cut change in the relationship from the moment the rape takes place. Why didn't you do something? That's a great quote, because that's a question that Francis asks himself time and time again. And it's the question that, of course, Nicole asks Francis. Write about it, Francis. Maybe you can find the answer that way. Now that's linking quite nicely into the theme of books and the literary theme, because it gives us that idea, it gives us that hint that maybe Francis is the author of the book that we are reading now. So Nicole is flattered by the attentions of Larry. Remember, there's different little hints in there that show that that's the case, but that doesn't mean that she's looking for a romantic relationship with him. There is a distinct difference there. She also enjoys her friendship with Francis and their growing closeness. And her relationship with Francis is very emotionally different to her relationship with Larry. And again, looking at the contrast between those relationships is really interesting and really key, because they're two very different people vying for the same girl, but for different reasons in different ways. And her status between them, again, helps to define that relationship. Francis sees her as a fantasy figure, but Larry sees her in a very, very different way. So thinking about the effects of that through the language, again, looking at adverbs is really useful. So descriptions of verbs, adverbs, really, really useful to do, because both of them could commit the same action to Nicole, but the way they do it will therefore define the difference in the relationship. So Nicole is flattered by the attentions of Larry, and remember that Larry has this kind of celebrity status amongst her friends as well. So she does also, as I said, enjoy her friendship with Francis. She speaks positively to him. She speaks about possibilities. She speaks about achievement, and it does seem like their relationship blossoms and they do get closer with each other. The key difference, and again, looking at that language, and the differences in the vocabulary, the sentence types, etc. The key difference there is the fact that the relationship with Francis is very innocent, and how children of that age, how a relationship should really be. Romantic, fantastical, all of the possibilities in the world, not sordid, and no kind of sexual undercurrent like there is with Larry. There is a definite sexual undercurrent with Larry, and it's when we read, it's really kind of frustrating at times to see that Francis can't see that. And the clear answer to why he can't see it is because he's not that old. Remember that he's still a child, and wouldn't have been exposed to that kind of thinking because he's not old enough. The results of Larry's attention mean that there's that destruction of Francis and Nicole's relationship. So that juxtaposition throughout is a really kind of key aspect of Nicole as a character. So some key moments for Nicole, as with any character in any book, would be the first time we see her and the language that Francis uses, and then The rape scene, again, a key moment for her character. When her and Francis meet up at the end of the story, again, is a key moment that you may want to look at. When her and Francis go to the cinema, again, key scene, could be useful to have a look at. And actually, one of the key scenes that I feel is one that is just packed with incredible, powerful language is when Francis sees Larry and Nicole dance. And he describes them dancing, and you can see in that scene so much foreshadowing. The vocabulary choices are fantastic. It's a really lovely, quite short moment, but is packed full of bits that you could use. And one of the things to look at there, again, for kind of higher level analysis, is the sentence structuring. So Francis's voice, obviously it's Cormier kind of talking as Francis, but Francis's voice is fairly conversational. It's fairly simplistic in terms of its sentence structuring, but that particular scene, and I'll just read you a bit of it now. So I've got the Pearson version of the book, and it's at the bottom of page 46 in mine, but I think it's in chapter 7. Let me just check. Yeah, it's in chapter 7. This little scene here, so chapter 7 is the table tennis chapter. This little scene here is fantastic for kind of picking out structuring and vocabulary. In the dance classes, Nicole was the most talented of all, her slender body dipping and turning without effort, as if her bones were elastic. Jealousy streaked through me as Larry LaSalle tossed her in the air, letting her fly, defying gravity for a breathless moment, then caught her, pressing her close, their faces almost touching, their lips only an inch or so from a kiss, before he allowed her to slip down against his body. He applauded her, his eyes looking deeply into hers as she lay at his feet. This extract is rich in both structural and lexical kind of goodies for you to unpack, really. So I would really suggest kind of looking at that little section, and from the point of view of both Francis, Larry and Nicole, really, there's lots that you could pick out there. The sentence structuring for Francis is really interesting. Have a look and see just how many commas are being used in that sentence that starts with "jealousy streaked through me," and what the effect of that is, because that sentence is starkly long in comparison with a lot of other sentences that he uses. Maybe have a look at that in comparison to when he's describing some of the horrors of the war. Are there any similarities there in terms of structuring? Because if you think about it, he remembers the horrors of war, and this here is him remembering something, because it's like he's recalling what's going on, and he's telling this story in the knowledge of what happens next. So he knows that Larry is going to assault Nicole, so he's talking about this, which has happened beforehand, but he knows that will happen. So that foreshadowing kind of is designed, it's like it subconsciously seeps in, and as a result, some of the structuring is really interesting. So have a look at that and see if there's something that you could comment on. Have a look at some of the language. Look at who is in control as well. So if the structuring, if you're finding that really difficult, if you can't find much to talk about there, take it back and just look at what is being said and who is in control, because that can define easily the relationship between Larry and Nicole. And how do you know they're in control? What specific words tell you that they are in control? So that's actually one of my kind of favourite parts of the story to pick apart, because I think it's just so rich in terms of the language that's there. But there's lots of key moments for Nicole that you can look at. And of course, your class teachers will have key moments that they'll want to discuss with you in key extracts and so on as well. That's it for the character of Nicole. In our next episode, we will hopefully be looking at the character of Larry LaSalle. If there's something specific that you would like to have covered in a future episode, covering Heroes, Inspector Calls, or of Mice and Men, which are the 3 texts that my school studies, then you can tweet or you can leave a voice comment on this podcast episode, and I'll be able to then respond to you. Lots of the notes, as I said, are not original. They've just been gathered from teaching these for a few years, and also using the really helpful York notes. If you want to look at the York notes in more detail, then your class teacher may have a copy that you are able to look at, or they are of course available to purchase as well. I hope this was helpful to some of you. Thank you very much for listening, and happy revising. The music used in this podcast is by Ixon, and you can find him on SoundCloud. The tracks used are Eclipse and Explore.